Kibaki were very positive for business, and we therefore saw a reemergence of confidence. We saw a number of companies making Nairobi their headquarters for operations in Africa. We saw companies moving head offices from Johannesburg into Nairobi. We then started seeing a number of new investors coming into Kenya. We saw Kenyans beginning to go to the banks, borrow money, and create wealth. We saw the middle class becoming again vibrant. So the last 2 years have been great.
Trademark East Africa is an organization which has been formed by development partners, with the UK being the lead country, together with Denmark and Sweden and a few other European countries. And this happened in 2010 following the government's agreement to have trademark registered in Kenya as a not-for-profit institution, and it's headquartered here in Nairobi. This happened because of the Kibaki government being proactive in ensuring that the institutions that promote development in the region are accepted.
The government has also been consistent in terms of legislation. When they pass a law, they stay on course up to the point of implementation. So that has given us, as private sector, confidence in public policy, in advancing the needs of the country. So that's why, again, investors are running here because of such type of legislation.
You see that a lot of, especially the sophisticated institutional global investors, always look at the mood of the domestic investors. If Kenyans are putting their money into Safaricom, you'll find that international investors feel more comfortable. They know that Kenyans know about the local environment, and if they're confident and able to put their money in, international investors will feel confident as well.
In 2002, the country had 8 television stations and 8 FM radio stations. From this handful of broadcasters, Kenya expanded to 19 television stations and over 80 radio stations through licenses issued to interested investors in the industry. Increased competition created many employment opportunities for Kenyan youth.
The greatest contribution of the Kibaki presidency was the promulgation of the new constitution. And in the new constitution, you have Articles 33 to 35 that guarantee the freedom of media. It is the first country in the continent of Africa with such a modern set of legal architecture to safeguard the interests of the media. I'd also say that in the 10 years that he's been in office, we've really appreciated working in this country because he personally showed a great tolerance to what media rights, and I don't think we have a single piece of litigation in court filed by President Kibaki against any of the media houses. So he really demonstrated that he believed in freedom of the media. And I'm sure that in the 10 years, there has been more than a 5-fold growth in the total advertising spend in the country.
Private sector members are committed to uplifting the livelihoods of the communities they serve in Kenya. Beacon of Hope is a sterling example of Kepsa members' desire to go beyond just looking at the profits and balance sheet to ensuring that corporate world serves the needy in our society.
The government has supported us in terms of giving us tax exemptions, and when we're buying the land. We've also had corporates come and work alongside us, and one that really came on big time from the word start has been Shell Kenya, and have been very instrumental in helping us develop the physical infrastructure around here, the fencing, the generator, the cooking gas, building of the dining hall, providing computers for our children. They've really worked with us since 2007 to date.
Beacon of Hope started as a healthcare center for women who were HIV positive. It has since grown way beyond this initial dream and now runs a children's home, handicrafts training and sales, and furniture making institution. Kepsa members are proud to be associated with the Beacon of Hope.
Tushangilie Kenya, taifa letu tukufu, Kenya tunayoipenda, Kenya nchi tunayoipenda. Twajivunia sana tukijiita wa Kenya, nchi yenye.
Leading to the 2013 elections, if you looked very clearly, you saw a campaign that we ran together with other stakeholders, the civil society, religious leaders, and working very closely with the Ministry of Justice and others, and very supported by the office of the president, the former president, that we termed Mkenya Daima, which meant I'm a Kenyan forever. It was a My Kenya campaign. Again, was to say that we needed peaceful elections and a peaceful transition, and we are grateful when we look back. All that creates stability for the private sector and encourages investors, not only local investors, but even foreign investors, to feel comfortable in investing in a politically stable country. At one time, Nairobi was called Nairobi, but that name changed over the last 10 years, and it became a safer city to walk and to operate, and for businesses to open much later. We started seeing businesses like Nakumat opening 24 hours. That was not possible before. But it's this working together and engagement. Around the elections, we did the same. We worked very closely with the security agencies. And we gave them information where we had information on what was happening on the ground. They asked us for help where they needed help from the private sector. And I think for us that partnership has been excellent. And we really are grateful to those 10 years of the Honorable Kibaki's role.
Interestingly, Kepsa, as an umbrella body of a private sector in Kenya, has got together more successfully and achieved more than many other such equivalent organizations.
Today, Kepsa has become a forerunner for other countries to start understanding what it can be.
We've got a lot of plans. We've got plans for everything in Kenya. We've got a lot of strategies laid out. All we need is three things: implementation, implementation, implementation.
So I'm hoping that the current government is going to play the same role of facilitation of private investors. President Kibaki laid the groundwork. Let President Uhuru Kenyatta now build on that framework so that now we can see the house getting to completion.
With all that we have seen, it is clear that Kibaki was here. Thank you, Kibaki. It was nice driving business with you.
Thank you, Excellency. It was surely nice driving business with you. I allow a few minutes so that we can all have some food, and then we'll move into a few words, and then we'll close the day. It's a short lunch just for us to enjoy, and you can watch this DVD and documentary and to remember the 10 years of Kibaki, highlights of the 10 years, because we could not cover it all. Thank you.
hosted in honor of retired President Mwai Kibaki. For the business community, this is basically a small token of appreciation to the retired president for his leadership over the last 10 years. And many of those in the business community have credited the success that they've enjoyed over the last 10 years to his leadership. It's during this period that Kenya's economic growth has enjoyed significant success. If you can remember way back before he took over the reins of power in 2002, economic growth was relatively lagging behind at about 2.2%. Well, this wasn't very encouraging to the business community, and a lot of them, business owners, were actually considering shutting down, and investors were actually looking for new markets for which
to just come and say a few words as he appreciates a government that he has worked closely with together with the private sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Elise, and sorry to disturb your lunch by having to listen to me for a few minutes. I hope you will bear with me, but first of all, of course, I would like to thank Kepsa and the whole organization that has made this lunch possible. It's fantastic to see so many business representatives here today. Say goodbye to His Excellency President Kibaki. And it's a great honor for me as part of the donor community and as a Danish ambassador to be invited to be together with you. But let me first of all, President Kibaki, use this opportunity to congratulate you for your efforts in steering Kenya to great heights, to a height that makes Kenya the big brother in this region. Big brother with the obligations and responsibilities that carries. During your tenure, we have seen Kenya attain a record 7% of GDP growth, and we have witnessed and we've been part and supported your efforts to see the enactment of the new constitution that has brought Kenya into a new dispensation, which is a case in point for not only this region, but for the whole of Africa. We have seen the development of Vision 2030 that has as an objective of Kenya becoming a middle-income country by 2030 through achieving a double GDP growth of 10% per annum. We from Denmark are very pleased to have been part of this development fraternity that through your leadership have actually provided support to the private sector development during your 2 terms in office. First of all, the support was given to facilitate your efforts in creating an enabling business environment for private sector development through the enactment and implementation of business regulatory reforms that are conducive to growth and development of the private sector. Secondly, within the same programs, over the last 8 years, we have been engaged in support to public-private dialogue aimed at addressing private sector challenges in order to create a conducive business environment. The Presidential Private Sector Working Forums, which is commonly known now, has been during your tenure has been a great success, and the roundtables you have chaired throughout the years have been part of this initiative. This in itself has been a key success as we now reap the fruits of this engagement, seeing the improvements of the business environment around us. Being very aware of the climate change issues and the impact that climate change is going to have on Kenya, or already has, I think we can see, from the heavy rains and the droughts that we have been through for the last couple of years. Your concerns in this regard have been and still are supporting the greening of Kenya. Kenya there stands out as a unique country in Africa. From the Danish government side, Kenya has been invited together with other countries, but the only one from Africa, to be part of the Global Green Growth Initiative. And we have had ministers coming to Copenhagen to present Kenya's case together with private sector representatives, standing aside, leading third world countries like Korea, Mexico, and others who are at the brink of change in their continents. That's where Kenya is now, and it's due to your efforts, President Kibaki. But most importantly, I believe that here in Kenya, young, brilliant Kenyans are now getting the opportunity to think creatively and develop, at one level, prototypes, green products that could potentially grow into big industries. We have seen representatives of gentlemen here today who are representing these industries. But we see also that the seeds have been put in during your tenure as president, that young entrepreneurs now have the opportunity to reap the benefits of the ICT developments that this country has seen over the last years. We are very much aware, Your Excellency, of the leadership that you have provided towards the East African Cooperation Regional Agenda. In support of this effort, DANIDA, the Danish Development Agency, through a multi-donor effort, but also includes our colleagues from DFID, has developed Trademark East Africa, which is designed to support the national interventions to improve regional integration and facilitate regional trade. Already there, we can also see that there's great progress that has been made. All these efforts, which have been made by the donor community, together with the government and together with the private sector, and this triangular types of cooperation, I think has been unique for Africa, but has benefited a lot. And they have consistently strengthened the private sector in Kenya and a new disposition of peace in the country. In so doing, the private sector has become an equal partner to the government in shaping and implementing policies to ensure they have a positive impact on the business environment. Your Excellency, President Kibaki, we could not have achieved this without your leadership. We are grateful to you for opening up Kenya, for opening up the economic and investment space that has allowed foreign investors and traders to develop confidence in this country, full of potential. Just last year, we had the first Danish Minister of Trade and Investment coming to Kenya, and it shows something about this development, that a small country that one I come from also now sends a minister in that particular field to Kenya. There is a prospect here that should be utilized, and we are continuing to build on this now in the coming years. So we highly appreciate your efforts in strengthening and improving the business environment in collaboration with the private sector that has seen investments, both foreign and domestic, grow for the better. With these few words, President Kibaki, let me thank you a lot for the cooperation that we have got from you and from the private sector here in Kenya. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gat. When we mentioned the Kenya Daima campaign, these were one of the major partners who ensured that that campaign ran from the beginning to the end and supported us and worked with us as a partner, and we're very grateful. The short documentary you've watched and a lot of other things that we've done concerning business, DFID has been a very key partner to also Kepsa, and I know even for the government of Kenya. And I would like now to ask and request Alice Tiafami, who is the head of office of DFID Kenya, to also give his appreciation to the former president, who he has worked closely with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. I think I've been invited here as the head of DFID Kenya, but I should send my apologies on behalf of my High Commissioner, Dr. Christian Turner, who's in London. He was there earlier this week with President Kenyatta, accompanying him to his meetings with our Prime Minister and with our Foreign Secretary. And he stayed on for a few days more to talk to potential investors in London, including in the city, who are very excited by the prospects of doing more business in Kenya over the next few years. I really want to convey the sense of excitement amongst British business people that Africa is booming and that Kenya is at the heart of that boom, or at least at the heart of the East and Central Africa part of that boom. The fact that Kenya got through the election with no violence, I think, has been applauded around the world, and President Kibaki should take a fair degree of credit for that, and I hope that investment will flow as a result. I'm very pleased, though, to be the British government representative speaking here today. I've been in Kenya for about 4.5 years. I'm just coming to the end of my time here. And I'm very aware of how much has changed during my 4.5 years here. Like a number of others, I was thinking about that as I drove up the wonderful Thika Superhighway on my way here. But looking back, I can see that the 5.5 years that President Kibaki was in charge before then was possibly an even more radical time of change. And the private sector and the role of the private sector really seems to me to be at the heart of that. I think the UK has, as is well known, very many broad and deep relationships and shared interests with Kenya, ranging from tourism, as we saw in the documentary, to military and security cooperation in Somalia, as we saw in London earlier this week. But I would say there are two which for me are the most important. One is business people working together for shared prosperity in both countries, and the other is the UK's commitment to working with Kenya to reduce poverty and try and ensure that all Kenyans benefit from the growth which President Kibaki can count as part of his legacy. I'm the head of the UK's development programme in Kenya, but I think I can objectively say that the business and investment side of those two propositions is the more important and will continue to become more important as time goes by. The rate of foreign investment, including UK foreign investment in Kenya over the last 10 years, the rate at which that has grown, I think by about 500%, is a really telling indication of how President Kibaki's administration has turned around the attractiveness of this country for foreign investors. Britain is very proud to be the biggest cumulative investor in Kenya, but we're also very proud of the fact that our investments in Kenya are not extractive. They're partnerships which bring benefit to both countries. I think it's quite well known that a number of the largest taxpayers, I believe 5 out of the 10 biggest contributors to KRA's coffers in Kenya, have got some kind of a UK connection. Safaricom, EABL, British American Tobacco, Barclays, Standard Chartered. But these are not companies which come here and behave like British companies and just take things out. They're companies who are coming here, investing, working with Kenyans, contributing to Kenyan tax revenues. And we'd like to see more of that. We'd like to see more Kenyan companies paying lots of tax money to pay for some of the very many things that President Kibaki has supported. But we're very proud that British investors are here and behaving responsibly. I don't want to do down the role of aid, though, and I think some people, it strikes me as I talk to Kenyans across the country, have a misguided impression that DFID is largely about supporting health and education. We have a big investment in private sector work in this country, and that reflects a view from our ministers that growth is the driver of poverty reduction. Health and education are enablers, but if the economy isn't growing and growing in a way which creates jobs for poor people, then true sustainable development will never happen. My minister, the Secretary of State for International Development, made a speech in the City of London a couple of months ago in which she set out her agenda for economic development, and her headline message in that speech was reducing aid dependence through creating jobs. And we'd like to think that some of what DFID is doing in this country is helping with that agenda. It's right that Kenya is proud that it is becoming less and less dependent on foreign aid as time goes by, but we can still help, and we're helping, I think, in quite significant ways. Things that we funded in this country, a contribution to M-Pesa, it's not that well known. I think that DFID put money in with Vodafone and Safaricom in 2007 when that first got off the ground. We're now working with Commercial Bank of Africa on Mshwari, which is another great example of innovation. I think the spirit and culture of innovation which has been fostered in Kenya over the last few years is critical to a lot of economic progress. We've recently signed up to doing some quite significant work at Mombasa Port with the Kenya Ports Authority and KRA, and I know that very many of you bringing stuff in and out of the port consider that to be one of the critical issues that still needs to be unblocked to enable Kenya to have export-driven growth. We're working with IFC on the deregulation agenda, which I think the excellent Kenya National Business Agenda publication highlights how much progress has been made on that, but the latest World Bank Doing Business indicators make it clear that although Kenya is making progress, it's working in a competitive global world, and it needs to continue to deregulate and make it easier for people to set up businesses and do the things they need to do to grow their businesses. So there's a huge range of things that we're doing with grant funding. The UK is also making investments in Kenya through public money, through CDC, which is wholly owned by DFID. I think the investment we've made that we're most proud of is in Equity Bank, a huge success story, and our partnership with James Wang and his colleagues is something that we're really, really proud of. The way in which they've been able to demonstrate that a business model that involves providing to poor people a service which many people thought couldn't be profitable and enabling an expansion of financial services across some of the poorest parts of the country, I think is a great success story both for capitalism and for poverty reduction, and those two things can go hand in hand. The CDC's invested in a diverse range of other businesses in Kenya, from Athi River Steel to Brookside Dairy, and I think there's a question as to what UK taxpayers' money should be used for when making investments in Kenya. It's really about closing market failure. It's about demonstrating to truly commercial investors that you can make money out of these things. And the growth in liquidity and in Kenyan capital being invested in businesses here, I think also sets this country head and shoulders ahead of the rest of the region, and that's a very promising development for the next decade. And lastly, in terms of things that we funded, I should of course mention our support to Kepsa, which we've been funding since 2005. Relatively small amount of funding. I was just discussing with my neighbour down there whether we needed to put money into Kepsa or whether you couldn't all fund it yourselves from the large profits that you're all making in this successful Kenya. But I think for us, we have a view of democracy and civil society which says that democracy doesn't just happen around elections. Democracy isn't just who the voters choose to be their leaders. It's about who the leaders talk to when they're deciding how they formulate and implement policies. And that's not just about supporting some NGOs who like to sound off about governance issues. It's about supporting business associations like Kepsa. It's about supporting religious groups. It's about supporting professional associations. A truly diverse and pluralistic civil society involves active voices from all those groups speaking up and influencing government policy. And I think another tribute to President Kibaki is that he has created an environment which is free and pluralistic, where all these voices can be heard. And I don't think there are many other countries in the world where, certainly in sub-Saharan Africa, where an agenda like that would be produced by a business association and would have so much influence on what government is doing. So I think that's a tribute both to Kepsa and to the people who've led Kepsa, but also to President Kibaki and his government for listening. I just wanted to end by quoting Winston Churchill, which as a British diplomat you're well advised to do at least once a week. I don't know how many people have heard this quote before. I think it's quite a good one. He said that some people regard private enterprise as a predatory tiger to be shot. Some people regard it as a cow they can milk, and not enough people see it as a healthy horse pulling a sturdy wagon. The healthy horse of Kenya is in much healthier state